Hello, I'm Delphina Martin. I'm the host and moderator of this 30-minute webinar. I am the head of climate strategy and solutions. A few words about CSER, about who we are, in case anyone doesn't know. So we're a leading provider in the space of the voluntary carbon market. We've got offices both in Berlin and in New York. We help our customers design, procure, and manage high-quality avoidance and removal carbon credit portfolios for immediate or annual needs, sort of always tailored to your specific sustainability goals. We provide end-to-end support from strategy to implementation, from the very beginning and setting the target to the actual credit delivery and the fulfillment for the goals, and also support you in ongoing portfolio management. And we also support our clients in reporting and portfolio optimization for the utmost transparency. Before we get to the interview portion, I'll briefly just also talk about the content, because the long-term offtakes, or LTOs, as we refer to them, tend to be kind of a complex topic that is still relatively new in the market. We have seen some high-profile examples of buyers being in the forefront of this, but it's certainly not the most common engagement tool yet. So I want to first talk about how long-term offtakes relates to the net zero targets, because the kind of support that CSER offers our buyers and our customers is particularly relevant in the market now and going forward, as we see some significant shifts starting to happen and already occurring and continuing or expected to continue to occur in the future, especially in relation to many companies' net zero targets. So we see many buyers have started to set science-based net zero targets for their strategic procurement, which means in the long term, because these targets tend to be further away in 2030 or 2040, this means planning with a longer term view for carbon procurement. At the same time, however, the market is not able to fulfill all the demand, and we started to see some of the particularly high quality, some of the very popular projects starting to sell out, which is in turn driving up some prices, and especially recently with the retirement demand increasing for Q4 in 2025. We see buyers beginning to secure volumes for longer periods of time, for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, to avoid shortages of volumes that they will need to compensate their residual emissions in their net zero years, or as the case may be with the current open public consultation with the SBTi standard, starting to take responsibility for their ongoing emissions. So this market movement, with low supply and with increasing demand, on the one hand cyclical, but also expected to continue to increase into the future, both of these movements together are expected to increase prices and for the prices to remain elevated into the next couple of years. So the buyers have not just to secure volumes and prices, but to also, in the case of that, avoid budget or shortfall risks, avoid supply risks. And that's exactly how long-term offtakes are a particularly relevant engagement tool that we see and that we're also here to discuss. So what is an LTO? An LTO, a long-term offtake, represents a commitment wherein the buyer and supplier, meaning the project developer, agree to transact carbon credits at multiple points over an extended period of time. This could be an extended period of time, anything that's longer than the annual sort of 1-year procurement timeline. It can be a 2-year, 5-year. We see some examples of a 10-year time frame, although this is a little less common. Most of the ones that we see tend to be 2, 3 to 5 years. And the benefits the LTOs bring with them are particularly relevant for this kind of changing market environment. So as mentioned, an LTO, right, in the case of providing supply security and pricing security, help companies and help buyers hedge against budgetary shocks or shortfalls. For LTOs specifically, more than just securing prices, we've also seen with the market continuing to grow, many project developers ready to offer quite significant cost savings, including in some cases up to 30% cost savings, which is quite significant. And there are also other highly relevant benefits, such as the operational efficiency, of course, very important to avoid having to take care of the annual procurement from scratch every single year, because each year there is a reliable delivery that is continuously monitored, continuously assessed, that continues to come in. And then, of course, there are also reputational benefits, because for buyers to engage in this kind of long-term commitment signals a certain strategic view for the project developer, which then also helps to build a great degree of trust between buyers and project developers in the space. Now I will invite Foster, who is joining me here to walk through N26's journey in the voluntary carbon market. Foster, if you could please introduce yourself briefly.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks for having me, and hi everyone. I'm Foster Glenn, Sustainable Finance Manager at N26. If you're not familiar with what we do, N26 is Europe's leading digital bank, offering simple, secure, and customer-friendly mobile banking to millions of customers in 24 markets across Europe. So our team, our sustainable finance team, we are driving our sustainability strategy That includes our carbon accounting, our double materiality assessments, our ESG reporting, and then our broader climate action work. When it comes to climate, our focus is really on owning our own impact, meaning we take responsibility not only for our direct emissions, but also from the more indirect emissions that related to our supply chain. This year, we actually introduced an internal carbon tax. Some of you are probably familiar with that concept. Some of you maybe not. So that's what that is taxing ourselves for each of our tons of emissions and then having that resulting budget to fund high quality climate projects. It's really our way of turning our data on our emissions into tangible action and long-term positive impact.
It's, I think, a great sign for N26 to also take such a strong step to say we're not just doing procurement, but we're also introducing a carbon tax. This kind of internal carbon pricing is a great lever. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now because we're coming to the interview portion of this webinar, and I'll start with the first question to also give a little bit of context over N26's journey towards LTOs. Foster, if you could, when you first started carbon procurement, what was sort of your main goals and what made you consider long-term offtake as opposed to the annual spot purchases? Like what made you reconsider a short-term approach in favor of something longer term?
Right. So, like many organizations, when we first started exploring carbon procurement, our main goal was, to take measurable responsibility for our emissions, while also supporting credible, effective projects. So again, I think that's similar to most organizations. However, beyond that, we were aiming to go a little bit further in some areas. A couple key ones in this context were we wanted to increase the amount of the more high quality removals each year in our portfolio. So those are removals that are a little bit more rare in supply, a little bit more innovative, also a little bit more costly per ton. So we wanted to start with a certain amount of those within our mix and then increase those every year. So that's key for us. And then ideally, we were already, ideally hoping to build lasting partnerships with the projects that we were investing in over the longer term. So not just, one-off investments. We wanted to, be able to communicate on these partnerships and, take the investment we're doing, monitor how it goes every year, communicate on that, and then come back and understand what we want to do for the future years. But I said ideally because it was still to be determined at that point if we could accomplish that through spot investments each year. Originally, we're thinking, probably do something like spot investments just to get our feet under us. I think a lot of companies think about it in that way. Initially we were focused on doing it the spot purchase way, but we knew that approach always comes with a few challenges. That would be the case. So you already listed some of them. Prices per ton for the same project. If you do spot price, we're liable to fluctuate year to year. Supply for a great project that you're investing in could be there one year, but then gone the next. And each new purchase means another review cycle internally, which becomes a timing issue. Those were the knowns. But as we got into it, we started to see that these challenges also compound each other a little bit. For example, if you have to do a new review cycle every year, then it depends on where in the year you're making that review. During that review, the price could be changing while you're trying to finish that review because you're not locked into a price. And then you might lose that supply that you were hoping for of a project yet previously. So those challenges really can start multiplying. And we really determined that we might really limit our ability to be certain that we could fulfill some of the tenets of our original investment plan. So again, increasing the share of those high quality and generally less available and more costly removals. That could become an issue with those challenges. And then forming those strong bonds with a given project over the long term could become an issue. So it became clear that spot purchasing was an ideal way to meet our objectives over time. Mm-hmm. We needed predictability and quality, costs, and our process to signal a genuine lasting commitment to the different projects we were working with. So that's what led us to start the focus primarily on longer term offtakes.
Very cool. So ultimately, that was what convinced you that long-term offtakes were the right move. Is the exposure to the spot market is that essentially?
Yeah, I mean, I put it in also in this way. I mean, I'd say for me, the real story here is that long-term offtakes let us be more intentional with our plans instead of being reactive, which in turn allows us to be more confident in where we're going on this journey. So I think confidence becomes key, and you're not playing catch up, and you're not trying to quickly determine what's available every year. With a spot purchase, you're in effect going to be responding to what's available on the market. Again, not just during the year, but at that point in the year when you're looking to act. So it gives unnecessary uncertainty. You might feel rushed to get things done earlier in the year than you would ideally like to in order to confirm those credits. With a multi-year offtake, you're shaping the impact you want to achieve with the projects that you actually like the most. So you get to focus on the projects that really tick all the boxes, due diligence wise and priority wise. And at the same time, keep in mind that you also, with the long-term offtake, you're giving those climate project developers themselves the necessary planning security to scale. So you're also helping the projects, not just your own plan. So we're also convinced by how it fit within our internal carbon tax framework. We've committed to making annual contributions based on our emissions. So we already have a decent idea of the funding that we'll have from year upon year, allowing us to more easily lock in a portfolio through LTO to give us price stability, lock in even lower prices, get discounts. So for us, it wasn't just a procurement choice. It was also helpful as a strategic alignment between our financial planning and our actual climate ambitions.
And that's a very good point, right? That's one of the points that I raised in the beginning, right? Is that to reach the net zero goal that you've set, 5, 10, 15 years from now, in many ways, you need to start planning now. And it's amazing to see that N26 is going that way. But looking at, right, because an LTO is different from a spot purchase in large part for the structure, how did the structure of an LTO kind of make it work for your internal approval and budget process? That's one of the complications that we sometimes see in the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting one that we learned as we're going through it, of course. What worked well is that the LTO shows leadership that we're taking a long-term strategic approach to managing our carbon impact, that we as a team are not treating it as a one-off offset, but as a multi-year commitment embedded in our business planning. So our team shows that, our company gets to show that. That forward-looking view builds confidence within the organization and externally that we are managing emissions responsibly and transparently over time. It also helped that the financial structure is flexible. It's not like we needed to pay everything up front, right? The spend still lands within each year's budget, just as it would with spot purchases, with the added benefit of price and supply certainty. This allows us to provide our budget planning team with precise information about what costs they can expect from our team on this each year and into the following year. Which of course is very much appreciated within an organization. They like that. So altogether, that combination, long-term mindset, predictable structure, manageable yearly costs, ensures that the topic is perceived internally and externally, not just as a nice-to-have expense, which sometimes things can fall into that bucket or seem to fall into that bucket when you're talking about environmental sustainability. So it's not just a nice-to-have expense, but as a targeted strategic investment into our climate goals. That's the way it should be.
That's a very good point around the proactive also communication internally and externally around the LTO, around the long-term engagement. And the next question: how did the LTO process compare to your expectations, sort of coming into it, in terms of complexity, time, internal alignment? Was it significantly more, or did you find that you also, right, in terms of the operational efficiency, that you've now can expect less effort in the future?
Yeah, so I'll say our initial assumption, our expectations were that it might add more complexity, but in reality, we found it was quite manageable and in some cases made things much less complex. The contracting process remained as clear and structured as it would have been otherwise. It didn't really change too much in terms of the complexity with the actual contracting. Choosing to procure via LTO did not really add any time. As we had discussed it with the Caesar team, we were discussing that part of the plan and incorporating it into our plans while we were, doing what we would have done anyways, which is going through the process of finalizing our selection of projects for our portfolio. So it's not like, oh, you have to pick your projects and then you have to tag on the whole process for, okay, what do we have to do for LTO? I mean, it fits really easily into the conversation that you're already having around, okay, this is the project we have. This is what it look like over a couple of years. It doesn't add too much complexity also if you work with a partner like Caesar towards those questions. And as far as our internal alignment, I didn't find it complicated anything, as we simply really had just to include the additional numbers into our proposal that we were preparing anyways. So it's still, one straightforward proposal, just with, there's some more years in the table. Once it was clear that that gave us an offer that was, both helped our stability over time and reduced different risks, and gave us better climate impact. The alignment internally fell pretty naturally with that, and it didn't really cause any barriers at all. Overall, I'd say the process helped us actually to mature our approach to carbon management.
Yeah, and I think this this realization that in LTO development doesn't need to take much extra space, much extra time compared to a spot, because you're also still covering there's a couple extra numbers that you need to consider. I think that's a very worthwhile point. So looking back at it now, what advantages do you see for N26 in relation to buying spot credits?
Yeah, so I would say that the most important advantage that we have come away with from this process is that certainty that I keep touching on cost, quantity, quality, ability to form long-lasting relationships with our favorite projects. You name it. That certainty really is a big takeaway. If we hadn't gone that route, I'd be sitting here now thinking, okay, we have to set up the process for next year. When do we start it next year? Start scoping things out. But now I have that certainty where we're headed, and I don't have to worry that we're going to run out of time, or we're going to just miss out on things that we're not going to miss out now. So by locking in our portfolio, we know exactly what projects we're supporting. We know what standards they meet and are going to meet, and what our spend will be over time. So that's really just invaluable for budgeting, planning, and our communications internally and externally. So that's the big one. The second advantage is the impact. We can't ever forget about the actual impact that we're all having on this topic and on climate change. So these are long-term, carefully selected projects that we're investing in that combine, near-term emission avoidance with long-term and an increasing amount of long-term carbon removals. So that gives us a balanced portfolio that matches our ambition for measurable and durable impact. And I don't think we could quite get there doing it with spot pricing. And finally, it's about efficiency. Instead of starting from scratch every year, we now have a multi-year partnership that saves us a ton of internal time, and allows us to focus on strategic improvements to our projects and our commitments rather than transactional tasks.
And looking at, for instance, some of the other participants, some of the audience, for other companies thinking, for instance, about their first LTO, what would you recommend for other first-time LTO sort of prospects, first-time LTO buyers potentially, to focus on to make the process as smooth as possible and as valuable as possible from day one?
Yeah, I would say if you're thinking about this, first of all, the most important thing to remember and keep in mind at all stages is that long-term offtakes aren't just a procurement contract or a procurement tool. They're really a strategic tool. So whatever your strategy is on this topic, it's a way to bolster that. It's not just a simple procurement contract choice. Secondly, it really helps if you have formulated your organization's long-term climate goals, overarching climate goals, and in particular, for us, we found that what project elements are most important to us in building our offset portfolio. Having those in mind, having those formally written down as a company, as a team, really helps prioritize things going forward. It helps you identify, okay, what kind of procurement are we going to go through with this? What type of arrangement do we need? Where are the issues that could happen from spot contracts that we can avoid through LTO. Like for us, I mentioned it's those long-term partnerships, growing amount of removals that would have gotten a little tricky if we didn't have the clarity. And the third, I'd say get internal clarity on your budget framework to the extent that you can. It's not possible for every organization. Not everyone has an internal carbon tax, although I recommend it. I think it's important in growing methodology that makes things a lot stronger and a lot more straightforward in some cases. But you don't have to have that to embark on this journey. If you know even like approximately how much budget you can expect to have, let's say in the following year, much easier to design an LTO that fits that. It starts sliding in very quickly once you just have an idea of that. And last but not least, I'd say build internal understanding early on. Take the time to explain to your stakeholders how long-term offtakes do reduce volatility, how they support better projects in the end, and then how they make your climate goals or commitments more credible to your internal and external audience. If you get those things right, the rest honestly will fall into place pretty smoothly.
Very good. That's a good note to end the interview on. We've just got a couple minutes left. So we've got the Q&A portion now. If there's any questions that are also coming in, please feel free to use the Q&A function. Otherwise, I'll start with the first one, which is how did you evaluate and select carbon credits? So I can take that question, and then Foster, if you should like to add anything to it, I'll invite you to. So LTOs, because they represent the continued procurement over several years. What's particularly important about LTOs is the revision of the risk assessment, which is something that CESAR particularly also does, right? We assess 400 different data points for our risk assessment to develop this pool of vetted and monitored projects. And then annually and regularly, we of course keep in touch with the project developers. We keep an eye on new developments. We have an adverse media monitoring tool, of course, that keeps an eye on everything. And for LTO specifically, it's very important because there's a delivery that needs to be assured every single year. Yes, Foster, anything to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think you pretty much covered what the slight differences in evaluating those versus the spot pricing. Other than that, it's really just setting out the different topics that you like to cover within your portfolio mix. What your priorities are, checking against that, doing those reading those risk assessments of every project, doing your own due diligence. But yeah, more or less, it's pretty similar.
So that's a good point as well, right? Keeping in mind the strategic goal that you're also trying to meet with this. We've got another question. How do you handle insecurity regarding amounts of emissions to be covered? And this is also a very good point. Again, Foster, please add to anything from the N26 side if you'd like. What we see quite often in the market is that there is there are some best practices around this, but what we see quite often is that there is a minimum threshold. And that might be secured partially or entirely through LTOs, and that there's then, say, a 20, 30, 40% bucket of the emissions that you think might be coming in the next year or in the next coming years that could be covered then through, for instance, some top-ups. That's an example that we have with several of our clients. That's a very common thing to hedge against this kind of insecurity, to ensure that you're not over-securing volumes, essentially, that you're not procuring more than you need, while still also maintaining enough flexibility to opportunistically, in the moment, go for projects that are particularly that have got a new rating, for instance, that you're trying to support at lower volumes, to try and keep the portfolio dynamic at the same time as getting the greatest degree of cost savings, of course. Good. We're just a minute over time. We have maybe one final question here. What checks do you recommend before committing to an LTO agreement? From my side, I think it's kind of touching on some of the bits that you covered earlier, Foster. Right? Is internal alignment is of course some kind of degree of budgetary certainty in whatever way, and that's something where LTOs can really support buyers in their journey. And I think. In addition to, of course, the risk assessment and the support that Caesar can provide for buyers, I think those are some of the main ways.
Yeah, I would just reiterate that, having somewhat of an idea of how much you can spend doesn't have to be exact, but making sure, that doing the LTO itself helps you understand what your budget should be. So it goes both ways.
Of course. Very good. Well, I think that brings us to the end of, I've sort of reshared my screen to say thank you all for joining us very much for this webinar. It was a very enlightening conversation. Thank you, of course, Foster, very much for joining us and for supporting us in this journey and for telling us about N26's journey. If there's anything, reiterating just briefly, if there's anything that has sparked your interest in this webinar that you'd like to cover, please reach out. We're always very excited to support buyers on their journey through the voluntary carbon market, through the VCM. The contact is sales@caesar.earth, but many of you also will have been forwarded this invite through contacts at Caesar. So we're very excited to be able to support you on this journey through procurement.
Yeah, I just say a big thank you for having me. Looking forward to finding out more about everyone's journey, and good luck out there.
Thank you very much. Yes, good luck. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.